Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about why LG has decided to move out of the smartphone industry. This is very big news. First of all, because LG is such a big business, and secondly, because LG has put a massive mark on the smartphone industry. LG was one of the pioneers of so many innovations that we're even using today, and because of that, I'd like to talk to you about the industry dynamics that caused LG to pull out of the smartphone industry. I'll be talking to you about some of the things that LG pioneered that it was really good at, but why in the end it still had to hang the white flag out there and had to pull out quietly, while even some new players, especially in the 2020s, proved to be better suited for the current smartphone industry's dynamics. So without any further ado, let's jump into the topic, and let's first of all get to understand LG as a business better. So LG Electronics is what we're going to talk about, but you need to understand that LG Electronics is part of a bigger LG holding. It is really massive from regardless of from whatever perspective you look at it. It was founded in 1947. It's a South Korean business, but if you look at it currently nowadays, it's almost everywhere on the planet. It has more than 200,000 workers, and it has a revenue of about $150 billion. And as said, LG as a holding has different divisions that are actually quite wide-ranging: electronics, telecommunications, chemics, right, chemical plants, and whatever. Health is an important division, and energy is also a very important division. And if you look at all of those divisions, the division that we are going to look at is the electronics division. And with that, LG Electronics as a business unit. So LG Electronics is one of the biggest business units of LG as a holding. $50 billion of revenue it makes annually. It is active in 128 countries all over the world, and with that, especially active in TVs and smart TVs, especially recently, right? Home appliances, and there was this third subdivision, which was the smartphone division. That division, of course, is now pulling out from, and that's what we're going to talk about. And so why is it important to talk about LG? Well, LG really has put a massive mark on this industry, one of the most important companies out there, if we're going to talk about where the smartphone industry is nowadays. And to understand the smartphone industry, one needs to understand LG's role in all of that. So if you first of all think about all of the things that LG pioneered at. First of all, it had its Prada series, and the LG Prada series was especially the hallmark of showing that for smartphones it's important to have good design, right? But not only that, but also to be innovative in terms of technology, because LG Prada was the first smartphone that really came up with this revolutionary screen technology, the technology that we're currently still using in terms of the touchscreen technology that succeeded and came after the much older one, where we really had to press really hard to make the screen work. Capacitive, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the technology that we're currently using. LG was first, and only then Apple came with its own version of it. And of course, Apple became much more popular over the course of time, but LG was first. Secondly, LG's chocolate series is also, I think, also quite important to talk about, because also LG's chocolate series was very important because of design. It again showed that smartphones are much more than just their functionality. Design is also very important, which was an important reason why this series sold so well. But on top of that, again, LG did not economize on the technological part of things. LG's chocolate series is actually the first smartphone series that came with an ultra-wide screen ratio, and this ultra-wide screen ratio today has become so much popular and so much more widely used. LG was the first, and perhaps a bit too early in coming up with this ultra-wide screen ratio, but it later on continued developing the screen ratio, and the LG G6 is actually especially known for this. Then there's the LG Flex series, and as the name also kind of resonates, the LG Flex phone series was the first series that came up with the flexible phone. And of course, the flexible phone back then, so from LG Flex, later on also became input for what we're seeing today in terms of the foldable phones, right? And so LG, with its LG Flex phone, pioneered once again in terms of technology and actually pushed the frontier in terms of smartphone technology and became the predecessor of today's foldable phones. LG Beauty, also a very important series, the first smartphone series that actually came up with slow motion or ultra slow screen recording. And today it's just kind of a standard thing on kind of every phone, but back in those days it wasn't. And the LG, with the LG Beauty, actually pioneered once again in terms of the technological development in the smartphone industry. Let's move on. The LG Optimus, also very important because it was the first phone that came with a 1080p video recording capacity, basically meaning that you were able to shoot for the first time videos in full HD quality. It didn't stop there. It became also the first phone that had dual lenses at the back, and of course nowadays we even see 3 lenses and perhaps even more. I have lost the count. But also, if you look in terms of 3 lenses, again an LG phone was one of the pioneers. The LG V40 was the first phone that had 3 cameras at the back. LG Optimus was also known for being the first phone that had a dual-core processor, and this was especially important, of course, for processing capacity, for being able to do much more heavy applications and activities on your smartphone. So a lot of things LG pioneered in, and this kind of also shows that LG was a company that was really bold, really assertive, and really out of the box thinking and really trying to push the frontier, not only in terms of design, not only in terms of technology, not only in terms of functionality, but if possible, all of those together. Sadly, it didn't always work well in terms of not always LG was able to juggle all of the balls at the same time. But another thing that actually shows that LG was really forward thinking in terms of all that it did was, for example, LG's partnership with Google. It actually is one of the few amount of smartphone manufacturers that had twice a partnership with Google in terms of manufacturing its phones. I'm talking about the Nexus series that we had before the Pixel series, and LG was the phone manufacturer of the Nexus 4 and the Nexus 5 in partnership with Google, simply because it was so well in the Nexus 4 series that Google wanted to continue this partnership for the Nexus 5. LG was also very bold, as I said. It really dared to do things, even if they later on proved to be not successful. LG still had one of its core principles to push the frontier. An example of this is, for example, the LG G2, one of the first phones that really pushed the screen size to the edge, kind of trying to be the first edgeless smartphone. Didn't really become for 100% an edgeless phone, but it was one of the pioneers in terms of having as big of a screen to phone ratio as possible, and it continued with this also in the G6 line. For example, the V20 again shows how bold LG was, because the V20 was especially fine-tuned towards those who love to listen to music with good quality, because the V20 was the first one that had a special input, a special gap in the phone in which you could have special earphones to basically put in it to have a higher quality listening to your audio. The boxes themselves, so the music output, the stereo basically was not perhaps that well, but the moment that you clicked in from the special input, your special audio equipment and accessories, then suddenly you would get a much better audio quality than other phones would give you. The LG G8 X was also very important in terms of pushing the frontier of smartphone technology, because the G8X basically was the first smartphone that came with double screens, right? You had the screen at the front and screen at the back, or you can have two screens at the front, two screens at the back, and whatever. Certain different types of versions and variants of this came on the market over the course of time, but the LG G8X was the first one that had two screens, one at the front, one at the back, for different purposes, because it tried to check out whether this would be something for the future and whether actually consumers would like and love this, and whether this would be followed up by sales. All of this, if you take it all together, then it was not all just a failure, because even at this point in time, just shortly before LG announced that it would quit with the smartphone industry, it still had, for example, a 10% market share in the US, which is quite a decent market share by all standards. But sadly, if LG decides to pull out of the smartphone industry, we simply need to acknowledge that not everything went well, and not everything going well, has been caused by many, many different things. Some external factors, some internal factors, and those I'd like to talk to you about in a bit more detail. So first of all, LG over the past 6 years made a loss of about $4.4 billion. So the income was not enough to cover the expenditure, meaning that it's either spent way too much or simply people didn't buy enough. And if you look at the pioneering in terms of all sorts of technologies, indeed LG is a company that spends a lot. But it also shows that consumers simply did not appreciate the technologies as much as LG wanted. And so LG sees these losses and thinks that, hey, it's going on for 6 years. Before that already, we kind of knew that we were not going to be number one or number two in this industry, and it's going worse and worse over the course of time. So perhaps we should at some point stop having these losses. And that's why in 2021, LG decides to stop being active in the smartphone industry. And so what's going on here is then the question, of course, that you may be asking. And so, yes, we said that, I said that LG was not bad in every market. In the US, it has a 10% market share. But if you look at it in a global perspective, then you see that LG's market share is only 2% globally. And yes, so it has 10% in the US, but in some places it has less than 1% of market share, meaning that LG's products do not resonate with all type of consumer. And if you look at what type of LG smartphones or LG phones in general are being sold and lead to this market share, then you see that especially LG is desired in the middle segment. So not in the high and not in the low segment. But that's a problem, because then you see that in the high segment, in the low segment, competition becomes more fierce, and LG kind of found itself to be squeezed there in the middle. If you think about the low-end segment, then there are players like Vivo, Tecno Mobile, Huawei, Xiaomi, OnePlus, all players that came up with high quality or relatively high quality, low price players that really, really pushed the limits of LG's capacity of innovativeness, of also trying to be relevant in that market. It had some smartphones in that market, but especially these Chinese companies that really got to understand the game of smartphones well and really capitalized that with low input, low costs in terms of labor, especially. Combination of low cost with high quality technology and manufacturing actually became too much for LG, and it just couldn't compensate what it had in terms of know-how, patents, history. It just was not enough. And so these companies, in terms of their manufacturing capacity, cheap labor, but also of course over the time the accumulation of knowledge and efficiency just became too much for LG in the low end of the market. So if you talk about the high end of the market, then what you see is that Apple and Samsung, right, two companies that are really doing well over there, and also some of these Chinese companies then came up, of course, with some high-end players. Huawei over the course of time has, for example, and OnePlus also have come with notable high-end players. And so the thing with this high-end segment is, of course, that the the profit margin here is also the highest. So you want to be successful here if possible, because then you can combine the good quality with, of course, reputation and image, and this can translate in a higher profit margin. It will make you more profitable as a smartphone company. So what you see is that Apple kind of always was different operating system. It appealed to people who really like the Apple ecosystem. So it was already difficult for LG to penetrate that market. And so basically Samsung was the biggest competitor here, the biggest player with whom it tried to fight for this Android spot, basically, right? Because Samsung worked in the Android operating system, LG did also. Both also being Korean also led to, of course, to interesting competitive dynamics. But what you then see is that because Samsung is very vertically integrated, backward integrated in terms of it having its own chips for its phones, this of course led to a very big efficiency, effectiveness, reliability advantage for Samsung. It can use its own chips, suppress the costs with that, maintaining the same quality, whereas LG, was not able to do this. It lost in time, lost in money, and sometimes lost in quality, and that was a big problem. If you get on top of that also some of the internal problems that LG has had, Samsung, sadly for LG, got the edge over here. And then as also these other players creeped in, OnePlus, Huawei having a very big cost advantage, again because of manufacturing, because of labor, and because of the accumulation more and more of knowledge and efficiency, it just became too much for LG. Competition is one thing, trends is another one. LG, as said, has made a lot of attacks, a lot of innovations. It simply tried to pioneer as much as it could. We have talked about some, but on top of that, LG had, for example, this modular phone where you could basically, just like a puzzle, you could take out some parts of your phone and put other parts in it. You could customize your phone as much as you wanted, because there would be this database, kind of this supply of all sorts of modular parts based on whatever consumer could buy these and tweak their phones to their own desires. Of course, this was quite costly because you need to have a lot of diversity in terms of the additional amount of parts that everybody can put on top of their LG G5 modular phone. So that's one thing, but also the consumers simply didn't want to be bothered by this, didn't really want to keep on tweaking and playing with his phone. They just wanted a phone and just wanted that to work. And this LG G5 modular phone sadly did not become the success that LG wanted and aspired for. Then there was also this gaming smartphone called LG Wing, which had a horizontal screen but also a vertical screen, and so it became kind of this type of a screen where you could play, and then you had a small screen over there, but you had also a screen on top of it, and so it was different. Definitely, it was something especially meant to play into the emerging, increasingly more popular mobile gaming trend, but sadly also here just did not have what players wanted. They either played on the consoles or on the computers, or on other mobile devices, and the LG Wing, sadly, despite the massive investment, did not become the success that people wanted to see. And then finally, there was this issue always with software of LG. It simply was not that smooth as an naked Android operating system, or it was not as smooth as some of the tweaked versions of the Android operating system, like for example Samsung's, which also oftentimes receives a lot of criticism, but Samsung has kept on improving that, or at least has compensated that by good design or by cheaper costs, right, lower costs. On the other side, for example, OnePlus always also tweaks the Android operating system, but also does it in such a way that it becomes smooth and that you don't get all these glitches and bugs and whatever. But LG oftentimes had operating system problems. Its overlay on top of the Android operating system simply was not enough. And then you see that if you bring all of this together, in the high-end segment, Samsung and Apple were appreciated more. In the low-end segment, you see Huawei, Xiaomi, Tecno Mobile, Vivo, Oppo, whatever, all of these being preferred. LG, being in the middle, sees that Samsung and Apple are all the time trying to get more and more downward because they're also decreasing their prices, getting new versions of their phones that also are cheaper, but at the same time trying to still push the technology frontier. Then you see these cheap players, relatively cheap players like Xiaomi, like Huawei. You see them creeping up, coming with better phones, higher quality, but also higher priced phones. And then LG not being able to go beyond itself, then sees itself increasingly more in a smaller market, one where it is increasingly losing reputation and where others are increasingly gaining more reputation. Then you see that the R&D investments of LG simply did not get sales counterpart to it, and that's why then in the last 6 years especially, LG has lost over $4 billion in terms of money. So bringing all of this together, said that why is LG closing the business, right? Why is LG not downsizing, not focusing on a specific geographical market? The idea behind this is that the smartphone division is a relatively small division of the general LG Electronics business unit. So LG Electronics is more dependent on TVs, for example, more dependent also in terms of home appliances for its income than it is on smartphones. And as a relatively small division, even if it downsizes and even if it makes money, it thinks that it's not worth it to put so much effort in having the relatively small division to become better and better. So it wants to kind of break out of its chains, break out of the path dependence, and wants to break out of the sunk costs. And it thinks that if it can stop making losses here, and if it doesn't have to invest anymore in smartphones, and if it can just look forward, then it can put this funds that are going to be freed up in terms of other parts of its businesses. Smartphones are only 7.4% of its total income, and so it thinks that the 7.4% leads to more losses than they gain my business, and so I can free up the funds and invest in other parts of my business. And so LG, in talk about how we're going to go forward, LG is thinking about the Internet of Things. It's thinking about robotics, thinking about the EV market, and having especially certain fine-tuned, tweaked, or tailor-made parts for electric vehicle manufacturers and supplying these, right? Also thinking of South Korea having important vehicle producing companies, vehicle manufacturers, EV manufacturers. It can be an important supplier there. Think about smart homes, and with that of course home appliances, and about artificial intelligence as new areas where it is going to spend this money on, or at least existing areas that it wants to even move faster than it already did, and this way it's going to try to be even more successful in those areas that it already was. So what's going to happen with the smartphone industry the moment that LG pulls out? I think that's also quite important to think of. First of all, LG not pushing the frontiers anymore, not pioneering in certain technologies, means that others have to, right? And you see it already. Samsung and Apple are trying to do things. Huawei, Xiaomi are trying to do things. But that one engine, one driver of smartphone technology improvements is gone, means that this burden is going to fall on others, and they cannot just copy and improve what LG was doing. Now others have to do those kind of things by themselves. On top of this, what you're going to see that in the upper segment, LG was active, not mainly, but it was active over there, had some devices over there. Most likely Samsung is going to fill that void because Samsung is the Android player here, and it's not very likely that LG consumers, because they were used to the Android operating system, it's not likely that they're going to move to Apple. Most likely they're going to search for this other Android player, and with this Samsung becomes one of the most likely bets. Also because it's a Korean company. But given the price competition that comes from China and price competition that comes with increasingly higher qualities, Chinese players is also difficult, or important at least, to take into account. If you look at the bottom segment, the lower segment, then you see that especially there, not much is going to change. The current trend, I think, is going to continue. You're going to see that the Chinese manufacturers are going to get an even stronger hold over here, and they're really going to dominate that area simply because they can with the lower costs. And most likely, the biggest changes are going to happen in the middle part of the market. In the middle part, there the biggest vacuum is going to exist by LG pulling out, and then we are going to see who can combine best lower costs with higher quality, and then it's really going to be a clash of giants. Apple is not really interested in filling that void again, so you're again going to see a clash between Samsung especially and the Chinese smartphone manufacturers. Even now you kind of already see campaigns, promotions by Samsung and Apple that are saying that bring your old LG phone and you will get a Samsung phone with a discount. And you see that these players are increasingly becoming more aggressive and trying to fill the void, not in a passive manner and not waiting and letting things happen, but in a very proactive manner, trying to fill that void through these kinds of promotional activities, trying to directly replace LG market share through their own market share. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, please don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world and hope to see you again anytime soon. Take care.